the only son of the Gustav family in City A. Dean, who was known as a business prodigy, disappeared during an overseas inspection and was declared dead. I held my big belly and clutched his old watch with a special mark on it, crying my eyes out in front of his family's villa. At first, I just wanted to get some food and then slip away. Unexpectedly, I was so emotional that I went into premature labor. When I woke up, the two elders of the Gustav family each held a wrinkled little baby, their faces beaming with the joy of having what they thought was lost returned. They look alike. That nose, those eyes, they're just like Dean. Me? Well, how about just pretending for another year? The second year. Goodness, the babies are growing up to look more and more like their father. They're just like carbon copies. Me? Hee hee. Then let's pretend for another year. The third year. What? Dean isn't dead and has come back. I quickly picked up one baby in each hand, ready to run away. A pair of eyes as sharp as a falcon locked onto the three of us coldly. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. A few months ago, the small company I worked for went bankrupt, and the boss ran away with the money. I lost my job. To make matters worse, I found out that I was pregnant. I couldn't afford the rent. My savings were all gone, and I even had trouble getting enough to eat. I clutched the badly worn old watch in my hand. It was accidentally knocked off the wrist of a kind person who helped me when I fainted while looking for a job at the job market. He was in a hurry and I didn't have a chance to return it. Later, I learned that this seemingly ordinary watch had a unique mark of the character, Dean, engraved inside. To make matters even more troublesome, its owner was Dean, the only son of the Gustav family, who owned a top catering group in City A. The Gustav family started by making traditional imperial cuisine. Now, their business spreads across the country, and they are the leading force in the catering industry. As for Dean, he was young and promising, full of talent. At a young age, he took over part of the family business and was determined to innovate. It was said that he was also very charming and was the perfect target in the hearts of countless socialites. Unfortunately, a few months ago, when he went overseas to inspect a remote food ingredient base, he encountered a mudslide and disappeared without a trace. Dean was the only descendant of the Gustav family, and now their family line seemed to be broken. After learning all this, I held the watch, feeling like I was holding a hot potato. If I sold it, I would definitely be regarded as a thief. If I returned it, their son had just died. So what would it look like if I showed up at this time? I was so hungry that I felt dizzy and couldn't hold on any longer. I steeled myself and knocked on the door of the Gustav family's house. I didn't have any greedy intentions. I just wanted a few full meals and some money, and then I would leave. That was my plan. The nanny who opened the door was shocked when she saw the watch in my hand and my slightly protruding belly. Right after that, a well-maintained noblewoman with sorrow in her eyes and brows hurried out. When she saw the watch, her face instantly turned pale. This watch. Who are you? What's your relationship with our Dean? I didn't say anything. I just covered my face and cried even harder, with tears streaming down. Then I tilted and fell down on purpose. Hurry up. Call an ambulance. Help her in. There were noisy footsteps and exclamations in my ears, and I secretly breathed a sigh of relief. This child had nothing to do with Dean. That night, the company went bankrupt, and I was penniless. In desperation, I got dead drunk in a bar. I couldn't remember what happened after that. I only remembered waking up in a high-end hotel the next day, and there was no one beside me. I didn't even know what the man looked like. And this watch, I picked it up outside the job market later. I was just a desperate liar. Top-notch Buddha jumps over the wall. Crab meat lion's head. A table was filled with delicious food. I was so hungry that I buried my head and wolfed down the food. Mr. Gustav and Mrs. Gustav, the owners of the Gustav family sitting opposite me, were stunned. The private doctor smiled and explained, "This young lady is carrying twins. She has a great need for nutrition. She probably fainted from hunger before." Twins. I stopped my chopsticks, feeling a bit confused. Mrs. Gustav excitedly grabbed my hand. "Good child. Tell Auntie quickly. Did Dean really give you this watch?" I avoided her gaze and didn't dare to answer. Mr. Gustav pulled his wife away, and his voice was trembling slightly. "Girl, where are you from?" I composed myself. "My name is Jocelyn. My home is in a small county. My parents passed away early, and I came out to work alone." He sighed, with bitterness in his voice. The last time Dean contacted us, he said he was going to inspect a remote food ingredient base. You're a good girl. You've suffered so much, and it's not easy for you to hold on until now while being pregnant. I touched my belly, feeling mixed emotions. That drunk night was a stain on my life. I was unmarried and pregnant, and I didn't even know who the father of the child was. I cried. I was scared, and I even thought about ending it all. But every time I thought of my parents' last words, telling me to live well, I couldn't bear to die. The little lives in my belly were growing day by day, and their heartbeats were so strong, as if they were also telling me to be strong and live on. But looking at the parents who had lost their child, the pain in their eyes was so real. I felt that I was despicable. I shouldn't have taken advantage of their pain of losing their son. Just as I was about to confess, Mrs. Gustav couldn't wait any longer. She suddenly grabbed my hand. Her bloodshot eyes filled with tears, and she growled almost hysterically. Tell me, you said this watch was given to you by him. You said the child you're carrying is the flesh and blood of our Gustav family. I shrank back, scared by her excited emotions. I'm sorry. Suddenly, a sharp pain came from my belly, and a warm current gushed out. Mr. Gustav and Mrs. Gustav looked at the water stain under me in horror. She's going into labor. When I opened my eyes, Mr. Gustav and Mrs. Gustav each held a small, soft baby, laughing until tears came out. They look alike. The grandson's nose is just like Dean's when he was a child. Yes, the granddaughter's eyes are also like his. They really look alike. I stared at them blankly, then looked at the two little ones. They were red, wrinkled, and their features hadn't fully formed. Do they really look alike? Mrs. Gustav sat by my bedside, looking apologetic. Jocelyn, it's all my fault. I scared you just now. I was too hasty. You're a girl, and there are some things you must be too embarrassed to say. I even caused you to have a premature birth. If something happened to my precious grandchildren, how could I live? Mr. Gustav also smiled and said, your body is too weak. If you were outside, the consequences would be unimaginable. Fortunately, you found the Gustav family, and the doctor arrived in time. Although the children were born prematurely, what good things don't we have in the Gustav family? We will definitely raise them fat and white. I said you're a blessed girl. The words of confession were swallowed back again. He was right. If I gave birth outside, it was very likely that I and the children would all die. I'm not a saint. I just want to live. Then, let's just pretend for another year. I pretended to wipe my tears. I'm sorry. I'm not a good girl. Dean and we met in that place where he went to inspect a few months ago. We were impulsive. I tried to recall the vague impression of the owner of the watch, but I couldn't remember any specific features. By the way, there seemed to be a small scratch on the inside of the watch band. I still remember. There seems to be a very tiny scratch on the inside of his watch band. Yes, that's right. That scratch. Mr. Gustav clapped his hands excitedly. Mrs. Gustav also cried with joy. Great. Our Gustav family has an heir. With the grandchildren, the two elders' sorrow was greatly reduced. The Gustav family held a grand full moon banquet for the two children and officially entered them into the Gustav family genealogy. Dean's grandfather personally named the grandson Edward and the granddaughter Madge. My name, Jocelyn, was also recorded in the genealogy as Dean's wife. When they proposed it, I waved my hands in a panic. No, my status is low. Mrs. Gustav pressed my hand seriously. Jocelyn, you've suffered. Dean is gone, but you gave birth to the dragon and phoenix twins for our Gustav family, continuing our family line. This is a great merit. I had an awkward expression. Was it possible that these two children had nothing to do with the Gustav family? Things seemed to be getting more and more out of control. The news that I lived in the Gustav family and gave birth to the dragon and phoenix twins quickly spread in the circle. I don't know who added fuel to the fire and made up several versions of the story between me and Dean. Stories like the talented elite falling in love at first sight with the innocent girl, romantic encounters during inspections in remote mountainous areas, forbidden love that breaks through worldly taboos. In short, the core idea was that the Gustav family now had successors, and it was in an extremely romantic way. Me, who made up all these stories. Mr. Gustav twirled his fingers, looking proud. I spread the news and just changed a few details. I don't want those old fellows to keep saying that our Gustav family will be without an heir. Now I have 2 grandchildren. They'll be green with envy. Me. A few months later, at a family banquet of the Gustav family, someone came who was jealous. I held Madge and sat next to Mrs. Gustav. A woman wearing an exquisite dress, who seemed to be about Dean's age, glared at me with red eyes. Did you really meet Dean in that mountainous area? I felt guilty and lowered my head, pretending to be shy. Seeing me like this, she became even angrier and pointed at Edward and Madge with a sneer. I don't think they look like Dean at all. You must be here to deceive us because you know the Gustav family is rich. As soon as she finished speaking, a shrewd middle-aged man next to her also looked at me with a scrutinizing gaze. Sister-in-law, I also think this is too much of a coincidence. We need to look into this girl's background carefully. My heart skipped a beat. The man's voice sounded familiar, as if I had heard it somewhere before. Mrs. Gustav immediately frowned. Gavin, Miss Marcia. Jocelyn is now the daughter-in-law of our Gustav family, and Edward and Madge are our Gustav family's grandchildren. If anyone questions this again, they don't need to come to the Gustav family anymore. The faces of the people present changed, and no one dared to say anything more. After the banquet, Mrs. Gustav was afraid that I would think too much and explained to me. The woman was Marcia, Dean's childhood friend and the daughter of a business partner. Don't take it to heart, Marcia. She just liked Dean very much. And the middle-aged man was Dean's uncle, Gavin, who currently served as the vice president of the Gustav family group. Your uncle Gavin has been helping your father-in-law manage the company. He watched Dean grow up and cares a lot about the affairs of the Gustav family. He didn't mean any harm. I nodded. So he was Dean's uncle. No wonder his voice sounded familiar. I seemed to have heard him speak in the news before. After that, the 2 elders of the Gustav family doted on the 2 children even more. They treated me like their own daughter. I didn't have much education, and they didn't force me to learn the etiquette of a socialite. On the contrary, when Mr. Gustav saw that I had opened up a small piece of land in the yard and was researching the cultivation and breeding of some food ingredients, he beamed with joy. You have the same spirit as your grandfather when he was young. Our Gustav family started with the food business. Jocelyn, you were born to be a member of our Gustav family. My cheeks turned red, and I casually mentioned some ideas about food ingredient cultivation and traditional craftsmanship to him. My grandmother's family used to run a small food store, and influenced by that, I was interested in these things. Now that I had food and shelter in the Gustav family, I still felt that a person shouldn't be idle. I wanted to do something, and maybe I could help the Gustav family a bit as a way to repay their kindness of taking me in. Mr. Gustav was very interested when he heard this. Dean used to think about these things too. It's a pity. He paused. There are some materials and notes about traditional food ingredients and craftsmanship that he collected before in my study. Some of them were left by the old master. If you're interested, you can go and take a look. My eyes lit up. That's great. The notes left by Dean were very detailed, covering the characteristics of food ingredients, cooking skills, and even some traditional food production techniques that were on the verge of being lost. One should not tire of refined food, nor of minced meat that is cut carefully. Good food ingredients are the foundation of a dish. Seek the taste and trace the origin. Traditional techniques need to be passed on and also innovated. I was so absorbed that I plunged into the study and the back kitchen of the Gustav family. I studied, practiced, and tried. Before I knew it, a year had passed. Edward and Madge could already walk unsteadily. They followed behind me, curiously watching me fiddle with the bottles and jars and food ingredients. They would shakily offer the freshly washed cherry tomatoes to Mr. Gustav and Mrs. Gustav. Grandpa, Grandma, eat. Mr. Gustav and Mrs. Gustav beamed with joy. My dear grandchildren, you're growing up to look more and more like your father. Yes, you're just like carbon copies. I looked up at their loving smiles, feeling warm inside, and the corners of my mouth curved up involuntarily. Maybe I could stay for another year. Wait until, in the blink of an eye, another year passed. I was studying a lost pastry with the old chef of the Gustav family in the back kitchen, and Edward and Madge were playing with the dough beside me. Suddenly, the nanny outside let out a surprised scream. Sir, Madam, Dean is back. We all stopped what we were doing and looked at each other. The nanny, Alice, rushed into the kitchen excitedly and was incoherent. Madam, young master, Dean is back. The flour sieve in my hand fell to the ground with a clang. Who did you say is back? It's Dean, our young master. He's not dead. He's back. My brain went blank, and I almost fainted. What? He's not. Nanny Alice was so happy that she shed tears. He's not dead. The young master is not dead. God bless. He's back to be with you. My head was buzzing. You go out first. I'll change my clothes and come right away. Okay. As Nanny Alice ran out, I immediately dropped the things in my hand, picked up one baby in each arm, and rushed towards the back door. Just as I rushed into the yard, I bumped into a solid chest. I slowly looked up. A pair of sharp and profound eyes were staring at the three of us without blinking. The man in front of me was tall and upright, with an outstanding temperament. His features were handsome, just like in the data photos, and even more charming. Those eyebrows, that bridge of the nose, those lips, they really looked exactly like Edward and Madge. No wonder the two elders of the Gustav family were convinced. Edward and Madge were a bit dazed from the bump. Seeing that I stopped, they wriggled unhappily. Mom, let's keep running. Mom, hurry up. Seeing that I stood still, the two little guys slipped down by themselves and pushed the man with their small hands covered in flour. Bad guy. Go away. On the man's expensive custom-made suit, several white handprints appeared instantly. My scalp went numb, and my legs went weak. I knelt on the ground with a thump. Mr. Dean, I'm not. Behind the man, there was a sneer of schadenfreude. Humph. Dean, uncle, aunt. See, I told you she's a liar. It was Marcia. Gavin was standing beside her, along with a group of relatives and business partners who came to watch the scene. Mr. Gustav and Mrs. Gustav at the front looked at me, their faces full of shock and disbelief. Jocelyn, you. Gavin took a step forward and stared at me with cold eyes. Big brother, sister-in-law, you've been deceived by this woman's appearance. She's a complete liar. For the past 2 years, I've been sending people to secretly investigate. Finally, I've found out that Dean didn't go to the mountainous area she mentioned before he disappeared. What an accidental encounter. What a token of love. It's all fake. He pointed viciously at Edward and Madge. These two children are just illegitimate kids of unknown origin. Edward and Madge were scared by Gavin's fierce look. They immediately puckered their mouths and burst into tears. Woohoo. Bad guy. Scary. Woohoo. Mom, Grandpa and Grandma. Big teardrops rolled down like beads off a string. These two children had been doted on as treasures in the Gustav family since they were little. They had never been wronged like this before. Mr. Gustav and Mrs. Gustav felt so sorry for them that they immediately rushed over to protect the children in their arms. Gavin, what are you talking about? The two of us old folks aren't senile. Look at Edward and Madge. Their looks, their temperaments. Whose descendants could they be if not from our Gustav family? Seeing that they didn't believe him, Gavin was so angry that his face turned pale. He turned to Dean, who had been silent. Humph. We'll soon know the truth. Dean, tell your parents quickly. Is this woman and these two brats liars? Dean gave me a cold look and stared at the crying children for a long time. After a moment, facing the different gazes of everyone, he slightly opened his thin lips. Yes. Marcia was so excited that she almost jumped up, her eyes full of pride. Gavin burst into laughter. Ha ha ha. The two elders of the Gustav family swayed. What? The children are mine. The voice wasn't loud, but it clearly reached everyone's ears. I stared at him in a daze, and the expressions of the people around instantly became very interesting. Gavin's laughter got stuck in his throat. Nonsense. How could that be? The two elders of the Gustav family hugged the children ecstatically, kissing and shouting. Marcia's eyes turned red, and she looked at him in disbelief. So, Dean, you and her, in that mountainous area, is it true? I widened my eyes, and the heart that had just been put down was raised again. Everyone craned their necks, waiting for Dean's answer. Dean's eyes were deep, and his handsome face showed no emotion. After a long while, he squeezed out a word through his teeth. Marcia burst into tears. Then you two couldn't help yourselves. Is it true? Dean glanced at me subtly, his eyes complicated and hard to discern. Marcia completely broke down and ran out crying, covering her face. Gavin's face turned green and white, and he left angrily, flinging his hand. The two elders of the Gustav family winked at me meaningfully and sent away the other guests with a smile. Soon, only Dean with a gloomy face and I, stunned, were left in the yard. In the study, the atmosphere was oppressive. What a case of being unable to control one's emotions. What a romantic encounter. Your courage is really bigger than the sky. Dean leaned back in the chair, his tone full of undisguised sarcasm. My cheeks burned, and I wished I could find a crack in the ground to crawl into. Mr. Dean, you've really misunderstood. Those rumors weren't spread by me. It was Uncle Who. He gave a cold snort and his gaze swept over the notes on traditional food ingredients that I had sorted out on the table. This study used to be his, and there were many precious books and materials in it. Later, Mr. Gustav and his wife saw that I liked studying these things, so they simply let me use the study. Seeing his increasingly cold face, I explained uneasily. He interrupted me and directly walked behind the desk and sat down. I quickly followed and knelt down with a thump. Again. Sorry. I didn't mean to deceive Uncle and Aunt. I didn't want to take your things either. I didn't covet the property of the Gustav family. He lifted his eyelids, and his slender fingers tapped on the table. Oh, you don't covet money. Then what's the purpose of you scheming to come to the Gustav family? Don't you know what it means that the Gustav family has recognized these two children you gave birth to? I was at a loss for words. I just wanted to get some food and leave. But, his face suddenly turned cold. But you found out that the Gustav family is extremely wealthy and lives a life of luxury. So you couldn't bear to leave. You want to use these two children to gradually take over the Gustav family's property. You want to take advantage of the family's wealth. That's your purpose. My throat was dry, and I shook my head desperately. No, it's not like that. I picked up your watch at the job market. I know I lied. The children aren't yours either. I used despicable means to make Uncle and Aunt recognize them. I crawled on my knees in front of him, and tears couldn't help streaming down. But I really just wanted to survive. I was so hungry. I needed a place to stay. My children and we needed a way to live. I had no choice. Suddenly, cold fingertips pinched my chin, and the force made me gasp in pain. He forced me to look up, and a trace of hostility flashed in his eyes. Do you really not know? Or are you playing dumb? You made up such a full-of-holes story. If Edward and Madge aren't my children, then whose children are they? On that night in the bar, you started scheming against me, right? My face turned pale, and I looked at him in shock. What did you say? Edward's nose, Madge's eyes. The faces of the two children gradually overlapped with Dean's face. It was him. It turned out to be him. Tell me, who sent you? Looking at it, you're not from Gavin's side. He frowned. Are you after the Gustav family's overseas food ingredient base? Or the HS group? Or the Lee family? A chill ran through my heart, and I tightly bit my lip, unable to say a word. His eyes turned fierce, and his fingers suddenly tightened. Intense pain came from my chin, and tears welled up and fell on the back of his hand. As if burned, he suddenly let go of his hand. A trace of imperceptible surprise flashed in his eyes. But he quickly regained his coldness. Even if you don't say it, I'll find out who's behind you. I fell on the carpet, and my voice trembled. Then go and find out. He seemed not to expect me to say that, and his eyes were obscure. Fine. Before I find out, Miss Lynn, you'll have to continue staying in the Gustav family. Please continue to play the role of the young mistress of the Gustav family, my dear wife. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless and using unpleasant methods. The next day, Dean returned to the Gustav family group. It was said that he brought back the key contract and core technical materials of the overseas food ingredient base. The board of directors praised him highly, and his position in the group became even more stable. Gavin's faction was suppressed, and their arrogance subsided a lot. After that, Dean became very busy and often left early and came back late. Perhaps it was the bond of blood. He was visibly affectionate towards Edward and Madge. Whenever he had time, he would play with them, tell them stories, and even cook their favorite complimentary food by himself. But he was still as cold as ice towards me. As for Marcia, who ran away crying that day, somehow, she appeared in the Gustav family as if nothing had happened in just 2 days. She still cared about Dean and even offered to take care of Edward and Madge. She acted like the future mistress of the Gustav family. Nanny Alice secretly told me this. After that day, I lay in bed for several days. I didn't want to talk or eat, and I didn't even want to look at the food ingredient notes that I used to like studying. Everyone thought I was sad because of Dean's coldness. Mr. Gustav and Mrs. Gustav felt sorry for me even more. They tried several times to call Dean to my room and let us have a good talk. They didn't know that between Dean and me, there was only suspicion and disgust. He suspected me and despised me. In the eyes of others, he was a business prodigy. If it hadn't been for that night, maybe I would also think he was excellent. But I can't forget the cold voice of that man in the bar that day. Whoever is willing to stay with me for one night will get this money. A stack of cash was thrown on the bar counter. There were laughter and whistles around. Some people struggled to survive, while others could trample on others' dignity with money at will. Madam, you better go and take a look. That Miss Marcia is almost taking over. And the young master and young miss, they're almost coaxed away by her. Nanny Alice was so anxious that she almost cried. But my heart was calm. I reached out and wiped her tears. What did I do wrong? Was it deceiving the two elders to survive? Or was it selling my body for that stack of money to live? If I had a choice, who wouldn't want to live a clean life? Dean, how much more noble is he than me? Okay, Nanny Alice, help me comb my hair. I'm hungry and want to eat. When I went to the dining room, Marcia was sitting in the seat I usually sat in, holding an expensive picture book and gently telling Edward a story. Dean was sitting beside her, looking at Madge playing with building blocks, his gaze gentle. They really looked like a happy family of three, just as Nanny Alice said. Mom. The two little guys saw me and immediately dropped the things in their hands and ran towards me with their short legs, hugging my legs. I stroked their heads. Okay, be good and eat. But Madge turned around and glared angrily at Marcia. Get up. This is Mom's seat. Marcia's face froze, but then she smiled again. Madge, be good. You don't know that I used to sit in this seat. I've known your father for more than 10 years, and it's always been like this. Dean slightly raised his eyebrows and didn't say anything. Mr. Gustav and Mrs. Gustav wanted to speak, but I interrupted them. It's just a meal. It doesn't matter where we sit. I pulled the children and sat down in the empty seat beside them, serving myself rice and picking up dishes. After finishing one bowl, I added another bowl. Mr. Gustav and Mrs. Gustav saw that I had regained my appetite. And finally, there was a smile on their faces. Nanny Alice, bring up the bird's nest I stewed for Jocelyn, and the braised mandarin fish she likes. I curved my lips. Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Mom. Marcia glanced at me contemptuously and reached out to hold Edward's hand. But Madge suddenly picked up a strange-looking snack she had made. It was the result of my failed attempt to study a traditional fermented food ingredient a few days ago. It had an extremely strange taste, a bit like the smell of stinky tofu mixed with natto. I almost vomited after taking a small bite myself. I don't know how Madge found it. And, eat it. Madge blinked her big eyes, looking expectant. Mr. Gustav and Mrs. Gustav's faces changed slightly, and they wanted to stop her. But Madge was persistent. And, eat it. I'll like you if you eat it. She handed another piece to Edward. Brother, this is for you. Edward sniffed it, and his little face wrinkled. But under his sister's expectant gaze, he swallowed it in one bite. She turned to the two elders of the Gustav family. Grandpa, Grandma, you eat it too. The old couple looked at each other and ate it as if they were facing death. She clapped her hands in satisfaction, glanced at Dean with a dark face, and ignored him. She raised her head and said to Marcia, Aunt, it's your turn. Marcia felt like vomiting when she smelled the taste. Take it away. What is this? It stinks. I won't eat it. Madge's eyes immediately turned red. Humph. Then I won't like Aunt anymore. I don't want Aunt to play with me. Marcia's expression changed. In order to please the child, she finally pinched her nose and opened her mouth with difficulty. Madge nodded in satisfaction. When she turned around and saw that I was picking up the chopsticks and was about to taste a piece, I was mainly curious about their reactions. She immediately ran over and held my hand. Mom doesn't need to eat. I love Mom even if Mom doesn't eat. I was stunned for a moment and then couldn't help laughing. This little girl was clearly trying to play a trick on Marcia. Marcia was so angry that her face turned green. You, Mrs. Gustav protected me. The child is just playing around. Marcia, don't be so serious with the child. Mr. Gustav seemed to be deep in thought and suddenly said in a solemn voice. That's right. The child is still young and doesn't know any better. Miss Marcia, I think you better come to our house less often. Marcia widened her eyes in disbelief. Uncle. But I used to. That was in the past. Now Dean is married. If you keep coming here, Jocelyn will think too much. I was a bit surprised. I didn't expect Mr. Gustav to defend me so directly. Marcia wanted to say something, but Mr. Gustav added, Marcia, you know that our Gustav family has family rules. Our descendants are not allowed to take concubines or have messy relationships. Marcia ran out crying again. Mr. Gustav and Mrs. Gustav took Edward and Madge, who had eaten their fill, to the garden to digest their food. At the dining table, it was just Dean and me left. He couldn't help but sneer at me again. You've managed to fool Mom and Dad. You're really something. I slowly sipped my soup and didn't even look at him. Likewise. You've defined me as your good wife. He seemed not to expect me to retort like this. His face froze, and then he stared at me intently. You really have some tricks. I really want to find out who's behind you. I sneered. Then go ahead and find out. Weren't you bragging about how capable you were that day? Why haven't you found out after so many days? He was so angry that his handsome face turned green. Losing his usual calmness, he gritted his teeth and said, just you wait. I put down my soup bowl and wiped my mouth. I'll be waiting. A few days later, there was a big stir within the Gustav family group. The vice president, Gavin, was taken away by the police for investigation on suspicion of embezzling public funds and leaking business secrets. It turned out that the so-called mudslide that Dean encountered during his overseas inspection was actually a murder planned by Gavin. He had been coveting the property of the Gustav family for a long time and wanted to get rid of Dean, the only heir. Dean survived the disaster and was rescued by a secluded tribe. He spent a long time recuperating. Because of the poor communication in that place, he only recently found the opportunity to contact his confidant in the country and planned this comeback and counterattack. When I heard this, I sat alone in the study for a long time. I had thought it was an accident, but it turned out to be man-made. The grudges in the wealthy family and the business struggles almost made me and the children the victims. I clenched my fists. In the evening, I carried a cup of hot milk to Dean's study. When he saw me, his eyes were still full of scrutiny and vigilance. Have you found out? Who's behind me? Is it Gavin? Or which business rival who wants to bring down the Gustav family? His face froze, and his thin lips moved. In the end, he said nothing and silently took the milk. He was avoiding my gaze. I probably guessed the reason and probed a few times, but he evaded talking about it. That night, in the dead of night, I kicked open the door of his bedroom. Then I quickly backed out. Who practices boxing in the middle of the night? 2 seconds later, Dean stood at the door with a dark face, only wearing a pair of sweatpants and with his upper body bare. Sweat slid down his firm muscles, full of strength and male hormones. He really has a good figure, with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. And his abs are clearly visible. On his chest, there is a faint scar. Yes, I remembered that the man that night also had a similar mark on his chest. Seeing me staring straight at his chest, his ears suddenly turned red, and he gritted his teeth and said, have you seen enough? I came back to my senses and remembered the main thing. I handed him a document in my hand. He looked at the title of the document, Preliminary Plan for the Cultivation and Application of Several Endangered Traditional Food Ingredients. And his face looked a bit strange. Did you break in the middle of the night just to show me this? I nodded seriously. Yes. These ingredients are on the verge of extinction. Yesterday, when I was checking the information, I found that the nature reserve where the last few wild parent plants are located will be commercially developed next month. If we don't act now, it will be too late. He frowned. For this kind of thing, there is a special department in the company responsible for it. I was a bit anxious. They don't take it seriously at all. These traditional food ingredients are the root of the Gustav family's dishes. Once they disappear, many classic dishes will lose their soul. You don't know that these ingredients are not only related to the taste but also to the cultural inheritance. If we don't save them now, they will only exist in books in the future. Dean's face changed slightly. It seemed that he was persuaded by me, but he still hesitated. Even if what you said is true, the commercial development has already started. If we intervene now, I interrupted him. I know it's difficult, but we have to give it a try. Trust me, in the past 2 years, I have studied all the information I could find and even tried to restore some cultivation methods according to the ancient books. As long as we can get the parent plants, I'm confident that I can cultivate them again. His eyes finally became serious. The nature reserve is a project of the HS group. I'll contact them immediately. Dean acted quickly, but he still encountered resistance. The HS group has a deep background and a tough attitude. They refused the Gustav family's request for cooperation or to buy the parent plants. The project leader even said that those useless plants take up space and will be flattened as soon as the construction site starts. Just when we were at a loss, things suddenly took a turn. A major scandal broke out within the HS group. The chairman was under investigation for several illegal operations, and the stock price plummeted. Many projects were forced to be suspended. The nature reserve project that was going to be developed was also temporarily put on hold. Protecting the endangered food ingredients can't be delayed any longer. I rushed into Dean's office with the detailed cultivation plan and transplantation plan that I had worked on overnight. He was on the phone. When he saw me, he motioned for me to wait. After hanging up the phone, he rubbed his forehead. The HS group is in chaos. The project suspension is only temporary. We have to hurry up. I've arranged the manpower and equipment. Are you sure your plan is feasible? I nodded vigorously. It's feasible. I've simulated it countless times. As long as we operate carefully, the success rate is over 90%. He gave me a deep look. Okay, let's set off immediately. The helicopter landed on the outskirts of the nature reserve. The rugged mountain road and the damp air made the environment worse than I had imagined. We took a professional team and carefully searched for the rare food ingredient parent plants recorded in the information. Dean changed into outdoor gear, losing his usual dignity and gaining a bit of wildness. He walked in the front, constantly keeping in touch with the people behind him and arranging the security. Although the HS group has temporarily stopped work, we can't rule out that they will send people to obstruct us. He explained to me in a deep voice. My heart tightened. After 2 days of difficult trekking, we finally found our target deep in the valley. Seeing those plants that had been described countless times in the ancient books appearing in front of me, I was so excited that tears welled up in my eyes. The transplantation work started carefully. Just then, an accident happened. A rush of footsteps came from afar. More than a dozen men in camouflage uniforms, holding sticks, rushed over with an unfriendly expression. Who allowed you to touch this place? Get out! The bald man at the head shouted viciously. Dean immediately protected me behind him and said coldly, We're from the Gustav family group. We've communicated with the relevant departments. Bullshit communication. This land belongs to the HS group. Get out quickly. Or don't blame us for being rude. The conflict was on the verge of breaking out. The people Dean brought immediately stepped forward to confront them. But the other side had more people and obviously came prepared. In the chaos, someone rushed towards me, aiming at the precious parent plants that had just been dug up at my feet. I instinctively threw myself forward to protect them. A stick slammed into my back. The expected intense pain didn't come. Dean blocked in front of me and took the blow for me. He let out a muffled groan, and his face instantly turned pale. Dean, I exclaimed. He looked back at me with sharp eyes. Take the things and go. The situation became even more chaotic. I gritted my teeth, picked up the most crucial parent plants, and retreated under the cover of the team members. Dean and his people held off the thugs. I ran a certain distance, looked back, and only saw him being surrounded by several people, with blood seeping from his back. If it was just him, it wouldn't be difficult for him to get away, but he was also covering our retreat. If this went on, he would be in danger. I made up my mind, handed the parent plants to the person next to me, picked up a branch from the ground, and rushed back. Stop. I used all my strength to throw the dirt and dead leaves in my hand into the faces of those people. It's poisonous powder. While they were in a panic and covering their faces, I grabbed Dean's hand and ran. Hurry up. He stumbled, and I dragged him to run for his life. I don't know how long we ran. We collapsed under a big tree when there was no sound of pursuit behind us. I gasped for breath and checked his injury. The wound on his back wasn't deep, but he had lost a lot of blood. He leaned against the tree trunk, breathing rapidly, and there was cold sweat on his forehead. What's more strange was that his cheeks turned an abnormal flush. He grabbed my wrist with astonishing strength. His eyes blurred. Water. Give me water. Something was wrong. This symptom. I suddenly remembered that night in the bar. Although my memory was blurred, the feeling of being hot all over and confused. Are you? He closed his eyes in pain and squeezed out a few words through his teeth. Yes. It's the knockout drug. Just now. Someone attacked. My mind went blank. Another knockout drug. These people are so despicable. Looking at his suffering appearance, I was torn. Should I save him or not? In the end, I dragged Dean to a hidden mountain spring nearby. The cold spring water made him regain a bit of clarity. Thank you. His voice was hoarse. You're welcome, I said unhappily. If you die here, how can I explain to Uncle and Aunt? He looked at me with a complicated expression. Aren't you afraid of me? Afraid of what? I retorted. Afraid that you'll eat me. You're in a difficult situation yourself. He fell silent. Soon, the signal for help he sent out received a response. The rescue team of the Gustav family found us. With the precious parent plants, we safely returned to City A. Dean's injury and the knockout drug he was poisoned with were troublesome, but under the best medical conditions, he quickly stabilized. When the two elders of the Gustav family learned that we had been attacked, they were very scared and were extremely grateful to me. And Dean, the way he looked at me seemed a bit different. He was less cold and suspicious, and there was more exploration and apology, especially when he learned that the HS group sent people to obstruct us and even drug us, and there might be remnants of Gavin's faction behind it. His face became even uglier. Sorry. He looked at me. I misunderstood you before. I pursed my lips. It was a big misunderstanding. This dangerous encounter also made the two elders of the Gustav family see the true colors of some people. Mr. Gustav was resolute. He cooperated with the police to dig deeper and completely cleared out Gavin and his followers. The Gustav family group experienced a major purge but became more stable because of it. And because I successfully brought back and started cultivating those rare food ingredients, gained a little fame within the Gustav family and even in the entire catering industry. Everyone said that I was the lucky star of the Gustav family. Only I know that I'm just a liar who was a bit lucky. But now, it seems, I don't want to run away anymore. The turmoil subsided, and life seemed to be back on track. I devoted myself to the cultivation of those precious food ingredients and established a special cultivation base. Dean was busy reorganizing the company and stabilizing the situation. The relationship between us became somewhat subtle. He no longer spoke coldly, and sometimes the way he looked at me even carried a trace of tenderness. But I couldn't get over the hurdle in my heart, especially when I thought of that night and his previous attitude. Perhaps he only felt guilty towards me and had a sense of responsibility as the father of the children. One day, I was observing a newly sprouted parent plant in the cultivation base when Dean walked in. Any progress? He asked. Yeah, the germination rate is better than expected, I said without looking up. He was silent for a while and then suddenly spoke. Jocelyn, let's talk. I straightened up and looked at him. What do you want to talk about? About us. About the children. About the future. My heart tightened. There's nothing to talk about. I'll take care of the children. When they grow up a bit, I'll leave. He frowned. Leave? Where are you going? Anywhere. Anyway, I won't bother the Gustav family's life anymore. Bother. His voice rose a bit. You've never been a bother. You've done so much for the Gustav family. Saved my life. And saved these precious food ingredients. You're Edward and Madge's mother. How could you be a bother? I looked at him and suddenly laughed. Mr. Dean, have you forgotten how I entered the Gustav family? I'm a liar. I took advantage of Uncle and Aunt's pain of losing their son and exchanged a lie for everything I have now. Even if the children are really yours. It was an accident. A despicable deal. There's never been an us between us. His face turned pale, and his lips moved as if he wanted to say something. Just then, my phone rang. It was a strange number. I picked up the phone in confusion. A cold, somewhat familiar laugh came from the other end of the phone. Miss Jocelyn, long time no see. My pupils shrank. It was Gavin's voice. Wasn't he arrested? Surprised. Gavin's voice was filled with sick excitement. Thanks to you. I've been having a great time in there. But I'll be out soon. Then, I'll give you, Dean, and those two little brats a good thank you. Just you wait. I won't let you go. The phone was hung up. I felt cold all over, and my hands and feet went limp. Dean noticed that something was wrong with me and immediately supported me. What's wrong? Who was on the phone? I trembled and said. It was Gavin. Gavin had escaped from prison. This news was like a bomb that exploded in the Gustav family. The police immediately launched a manhunt, but Gavin seemed to have vanished without a trace. The whole Gustav family was shrouded in a cloud of fear. The security level was raised to the highest. Edward and Madge were almost protected 24 hours a day. Dean never left our side. There was no longer any hesitation or struggle on his face. Only firmness and determination. Don't be afraid. I'm here. He held my hand, and his palm was warm. I looked at him, my heart in a mess. Fear, unease, and a trace of indescribable affection. One late night a few days later, the alarm system in the villa suddenly let out an ear-piercing scream. Something's wrong. Someone's broken in. The head of the security team shouted. Dean's face changed, and he immediately protected me and the children behind him. Go to the safe room. Just as we rushed into the corridor, we saw several figures climbing in through the window, moving agilely and with a clear target. At the head was Gavin. Catch them. Gavin roared, his eyes red. A fierce battle broke out instantly. Although the bodyguards of the Gustav family were well trained, the other side had clearly come prepared, and they were all desperate men. Dean protected us and fought against the thugs who rushed up. In the chaos, I saw Gavin bypass the crowd and approach us with a sinister smile. He held a dagger that glinted coldly in his hand. You little bitch, and those two little brats, all of you go to hell. Just as the dagger was about to stab Edward, I let out a scream and rushed forward without thinking. With a sound, the dagger sank into my shoulder. Intense pain came. Jocelyn. Dean's eyes were bloodshot. He kicked away the thug he was fighting and rushed over to hold me as I was about to collapse. Gavin tried to strike again, but he was subdued by the arriving police on the spot. It turned out that Dean had expected Gavin to act desperately and had set a trap in advance. The moment the alarm went off, it was the signal to close the net. I lay in Dean's arms, my consciousness gradually fading. Blood stained his white shirt. He held me tightly, his voice filled with unprecedented panic. Jocelyn, hold on. Don't fall asleep. I haven't told you. That night in the bar, it wasn't a deal. I like you. From the first time I saw you. I tried to open my eyes and looked at his anxious face. So, is that so? When I woke up, I was in the hospital. Dean was by my bedside, his eyes bloodshot and a stubble of beard on his chin. When he saw that I had woken up, he suddenly grabbed my hand, his voice choking. You're awake. That's great. I looked at his haggard appearance, and my heart was touched. The children. How are the children? They're fine. Mom and Dad are taking care of them, he said softly. The ward was quiet, and it was just the two of us. Is what you said before true? I asked. He was stunned for a moment and then nodded solemnly. It's true. That night in the bar, I did drink too much, but I was conscious. I saw you sitting alone in the corner, looking so sad and helpless. I admit that at first, I really wanted to solve the problem with money, but when I approached you and saw your red eyes from crying, I regretted it. Later, I lost control. The next day when I woke up, you were already gone, and I searched for you for a long time but couldn't find you. I was so hungry that I was dizzy and couldn't hold on anymore. I was both shocked and happy at that time, but more angry and suspicious. I thought you had deliberately approached me. He held my hand tightly. I'm sorry, Jocelyn. I hurt you. I looked into his sincere eyes, my heart filled with mixed emotions. It turned out that all this entanglement stemmed from a misunderstanding and two people who were equally clumsy and proud. What about the scar on your chest? He touched his chest. I had an accident a few years ago and got this scar. It matched the touch I remembered from that night. All my doubts and knots in my heart seemed to be untied at this moment. Gavin was sentenced to a heavy punishment and received his due punishment. The HS group also completely collapsed because of the previous scandal and this incident. The position of the Gustav family group became even more stable. My injury gradually healed. On the day I was discharged from the hospital, Dean came to pick me up in person. The car didn't go back to the Gustav family mansion but stopped in front of a brand new villa. The yard was filled with various rare food ingredients and spices, and there was a large glass greenhouse. What is this? I asked in confusion. This is our new home. Dean took my hand, his eyes smiling. I've moved the cultivation base here. In the future, you can study your precious food ingredients at any time. And, he paused, this place belongs only to our family of 4. I looked at him, feeling warm in my heart. The two elders of the Gustav family were holding Edward and Madge and waiting at the door. Jocelyn, come in. Mrs. Gustav took my hand. From now on, this is your home. No one can bully you. Mr. Gustav said with a smile. Edward and Madge rushed over and hugged my legs. Mom, let's go home. Mom, hug me. I bent down and picked them up in each arm. The sunlight shone on us, warm and bright.